What's up, buds? It's your bud Bolt. Today we're going to be talking about skate sharpening. Did you know there's so many different ways you can sharpen your skates? There's not just one. Have you ever heard of the radius of the hollow or a flat bottom V and kind of wondered what does that mean? Have you ever gotten your skates back from the skate shop, hopped on the ice, and they weren't quite what you wanted? Today we're going to talk about all the different ways to sharpen the skates, and I'm going to give you a little bit of guidance to try and help you find the skate sharpening that works for you. Now, the best way to do it, of course, is just through trial and error, but using this information, you can make some decisions on where to start. So when you picture a skate blade, you probably picture the bottom of it straight across, because to the naked eye, this is how it looks. It looks like the bottom of it is square. And when you imagine it getting sharpened, it's almost like you'd think that it would be sharpened into a V shape, so that it's like a knife on the bottom. And we hear about skates are boots with knives on them. That's true, but that's not what the knives look like. In fact, there are two little knives for every one skate blade, because the skate blade actually looks like this after it gets sharpened. Now, these two little knives are actually very, very, very important to skating and the game of hockey. And these are what we call our edges. So we have both inside edges and outside edges. And for different maneuvers, you're going to need to be using different edges. And that's something that you will learn as you get a bit more advanced in the game and you start to understand how the physics of the game work. So for turning, you're going to be using different edges on each skate. So you'll be using the inside edge on one skate, the outside edge of the other. And so knowing about these edges just to begin with can give you a bit of a visual picture and help you with your skating and your agility to start off with. So the little semicircles in our skate blades that cause these edges to even exist is called the radius of the hollow. And this is a term you might have heard before when it comes to skate sharpening. And at its very, very core, this just means how big that tiny little semicircle is inside of the skate blade. And that's going to change a lot for your skating style and your sharpening, what size sharpening you end up getting. So if we remember from math class, the radius is half of the diameter of a circle. So the radius of the hollow is how big that semicircle is, how far deep it cuts into that blade. And that's literally the size of the radius of a circle. The size of the circle, that'll depend on the radius, and then it'll give you the measurement for the radius of the hollow of your skates. So the way you adjust the radius of the hollow of your skates is you bring them in to get sharpened, and you tell them the measurement of the radius you would like cut. So the way skates are sharpened is there's a wheel and they run the blade over the wheel. Now these wheels have a rounded over circumference, and the size of that round over is the size of the radius of the hollow that's being cut into the skate. So if you would like a different radius of the hollow, the next time you bring your skate sharpened, just mention to the person who will be sharpening them the size of the radius you would like. So the radius of the hollow is measured in inches. Now these go all the way up to 1 inch, all the way down to 1/4 of an inch. That 1/4 of an inch is going to be a very, very, very aggressive sharpen that will not last long. So I don't recommend it unless you're experienced and you know what you are doing. So there's a very handy chart that's used a lot in skate sharpening that depicts the different types of sharpenings you can get, as well as what they do and how they affect things when it comes to your skating style and your game. So this scale usually goes from 1 inch all the way down to 3/4 of an inch. So we're just shy of that quarter that I'd mentioned earlier, but that's because not many people get a 1/4 inch sharpened. It's very aggressive. And you can see that radius just get progressively steeper and steeper and create sharper and sharper edges as we go down this scale. Now, when we look to the far right of this scale, we're going to get more bite with a sharpening that's 3/8 of an inch. and we're going to get more glide with a sharpening that's 1 inch. We're going to go over what this means in real terms, but as a general rule of thumb, these are the terms that are used for skate sharpening. So if someone says, oh, I got too much bite, I need a bit more glide in my stride, it means they've probably gotten something further to the right on the scale and are looking to get something further to the left. So they're looking for a much larger radius of the hollow. So between 5/8 and 1/2 is usually what skate sharpening shops call their house or their vanilla cut. And this just means that if you hand them your skates and you don't say anything besides sharpen these, you're more than likely getting a sharpen that is between 5/8 of an inch and 1/2 of an inch. So when it comes to glide and bite, the first thing we're talking about is friction. So the friction between your skate blade and the ice. So with something on the right side, you're going to get more friction than something on the left side. And that's going to have a lot of deeper effects that we're going to dive into. Because if you just say friction, not a lot of people can translate that into, okay, what skills are going to be affected. So if we talk about agility, you're going to end up having more agility with stuff on the right than with stuff on the left. Because you have that deeper bite, you're easier to stop quicker, you're easier to make sharper turns, there's less of a pull when you try and do things. It's more stop straight to the point, because you're going to have a lot more bite and grip into the ice. But when it comes to stride power, grip is important, but not as important as glide. If you want to get the most out of your strides, if you want to do the least amount of work possible, you want to go with a larger hollow. Because then we talk about stopping. So this leads back into agility. And so with stopping, the more bite, you're actually going to have more chatter. So when you try to stop and your skates go, or you end up, pot over tea kettle on the ice, that's probably because there's too much bite to your skates. There's too much aggressive stopping motion that it's harder to control. So you're going to get a smoother stop with options on the left. And when we go back to agility, we go back to friction and stopping, turning, you're going to have a much tighter turn with things on the right. Once again, so you're gripping the ice. As you grip the ice with a deeper hollow, it's going to be easier to make quick, tight maneuvers than the wider hollows. A factor that really comes into play when talking about skate sharpening is your weight as a skater. So if you are a heavier skater, you definitely want to go with a wider hollow. You are going to need less bite to do the same thing as somebody 100 pounds lighter than you would. And this goes for kids too. Kids might have a hard time turning quickly if their radius is too large. Same thing with adults. You might be having a hard time turning on a 1/2 inch, and you might be thinking a 3/4 might be better. Another factor that can determine your skate radius is the temperature of the ice you're playing on. Now, if you're playing outside, you're going to want to get a deeper radius because you're going to want more bite on the ice. It's going to be harder to grip. So the colder the ice, you're going to want something further to the right. The warmer the ice, the easier it's going to be to grip into it because it's soft. So you're going to want something closer to the left. So when it comes to my ideal, I like the 1/2 inch. That works out really well for me. I play outside a decent amount, and it works well for my style of play and my skill level. So for absolute beginners, I suggest starting with like a 3/4. I wouldn't go all the way to a 1, but the 3/4 is going to give you a lot more bang for your buck in terms of stride power. So you're going to be a little bit faster than you would had you gone for something further to the right of the scale. And so you're going to be sacrificing some agility, which is something you might not necessarily have to begin with. And as you improve, you can adjust your sharpening to suit your game. So if you start with a 3/4 and it doesn't quite feel sharp enough, you're not quite happy, keep moving up by one spot and you'll eventually find that sweet spot. And then the good thing is you can just bring in your skates and ask for that sweet spot every time, and you're going to more than likely, if you're at a good shop, get a consistent sharpening. So another way of sharpening instead of the radius of the hollow is called a flat bottom V sharpen. Now this is a fairly new piece of technology, but a lot of players swear by it. I do want to say that personally I don't like this system. I prefer the radius of the hollow. It could be just that I'm used to it, but I find this system just gives me way too much bite for what I want. The good thing with this, it's a very adjustable system, so you can definitely play with it and play with the numbers in order to get the bite glide combo that you want. I think it's a bit more customizable than the radius and allows you to get a bit closer to like your absolute ideal sharpen. So the flat bottom V is measured by two numbers, and it's a fraction as well. Now this first number denotes the width of the flat bottom. So the width before that bottom starts descending. The second number denotes the height of the edge. So how deep that flat bottom is from the bottom of your edge. So as we mentioned, the steeper those edges come up, the more bite you get, so you can adjust how deep that is. But in this system, instead of there being a circle, there's that flat bottom. That flat bottom is going to have contact with the ice. And the more of that has contact with the ice, the more glide you're going to get. So you can really just sit there and adjust both your bite and your glide at the same time. So these numbers weren't just pulled out of a hat. These mean something. These are measurements. So this 100, this first number that measures the width, is always measured in 1/1000ths of an inch. And so this 100 is actually 100,000ths of an inch wide. That's how wide that bottom part is. Now, the 75, when we're talking about the height, is measured in 10 millionths of a millimeter. So this is 750 millionths of 1 millimeter. That's how deep the edges go in. So this is very exaggerated on the board. Everything has been exaggerated to this point. And this is actually basically microscopic. Like, it's very, very, very small, but it's enough to get you what you need. So if we do up a scale with the flat bottom V, the same that we did with the radius of the hollow, we can offer some kind of comparison. And some sharpenings are going to be fairly similar. So if you do want to try out a flat bottom V and you already know, or you're going to learn what your sharpening is, or you already have an idea of what you want, but you would rather get a flat bottom V, here are a bunch of equivalents. So the 90/50 is going to be equal to your 1 inch, the 90/75, the 3/4 inch, 100/50, a 1/2 inch, and the 100/75, 3/8 of an inch. And this all fits on that same scale of bite to glide. So that 3/8 of the inch is going to have roughly the same amount of bite as the 100/75, and the 1 inch is going to have roughly the same amount of glide as the 90/50. The steeper the edges, so the bigger the bite of the skate, the more fragile they're going to be, which means the more frequently they're going to need to be sharpened. Now, so with a 100/75 flat bottom V, or a 3/8 of an inch radius of the hollow is going to need to be sharpened more frequently than would like a 1/2 inch radius or a 90/50 flat bottom V. Now, I just rattled off a whole bunch of jargon, and if you understood even one word of it, you're further along than you were when you started in this video, and my job is complete. So over time, your edges are gonna wear. Even if you've got a 1/2 inch sharpening, even if you're on a 1 inch sharpening, your edges are going to wear because you are using them. And as they wear, that radius is gonna shorten and shorten and shorten, and it's gonna feel less sharp as you use them. Now, if your edges wear unevenly, which they almost always do, because if you're turning, you're using your inside edge more. If your ankles are bowed out, you're using your inside edges more. If you're backwards skating all the time, you're using inside edges more. That's going to lend itself to something that we like to call losing an edge. Now, what happens when you lose an edge? When you lose an edge, that shorter edge goes to grip the ice. You go to use the edge, and instead of gripping, because there's not enough there to grip, it just slides out, your foot slides out, and you follow. So you just end up on your bum on the ice. So uneven edges are a huge reason to get your skate sharpened, because you don't want to end up in a game on your bum on the ice every 5 seconds. So the technical answer to this question is every 15 to 20 hours of ice time, which means if you're playing once a week, which more than likely you will be to start out, that's every 15 to 20 weeks. For some people, that's every season. To me, that is a very long time to go without sharpening my skates, which is why it's so important with so many other things in this game is to go by feel. So if you notice that every 6th game you're playing, your skates feel dull, and you go get them sharpened the 7th week, make sure you're sharpening them before that 6th game. So if you say, whoa, okay, every 7 weeks I'm sharpening my skates, start sharpening them every 6 so that you don't have that game where you end up losing edges all the time. And you're going to get to know this well as time goes on. Personally, I sharpen my skates at very, very least every single month. And that's if I'm playing once or twice a week. So if I'm playing outside for once or twice of that week, it's going to happen more often because the hard, bumpy ice is going to wear out your edges unevenly. And because it's so hard, it's just going to take so much more to bite into that. So if we talk about profiling, this might be something that you have heard of before and might not quite know what it means. So profiling the blade, if we think of a profile, the word itself, it'll give you kind of an idea. So profiling a blade actually changes the roundness of your blade or the rocker of the blade. And so you can go from a very round blade to a flat blade. It's very dependent on what you like in your style of play. And if you go to a pro shop, they will help you find what the best profile for you will be. Now, the other thing profiling does is it finds and can adjust the balance point on your skates. So they have special tools to find where this balance point currently is, and they can move it up or back slightly in order to put more of your weight on your toes or your heels, depending on your style of game and what's comfortable for you. Now, if you want more information about profiling, I'm not diving deep into it in this video, but Coach Jeremy sure does, and that video is in the description. He goes to a pro shop and gets all the information straight from the source. So if you want to learn more about profiling, head on over to that video, and that'll give you tons of information on the subject. I do want to mention that I love Maximum Edge. I have never gotten a bad sharpening from Maximum Edge to the point where I seek them out almost everywhere I go. I've lived in a lot of different cities, and if I could find myself a Maximum Edge, I am so happy. I will drive out of my way to get my skate sharpened there. I've gotten my skate sharpened at a lot of different places, and no one has been as consistently good as Maximum Edge. So try and find a Maximum Edge near you. They do have locations internationally, so if you want to check them out, even for a one-off sharpening, I highly recommend just giving them a try. It's a whole system, so everyone who is a Maximum Edge certified will know how to run the system. And I've included in the description the link to their location finder. So go ahead in there, put in your city, try and find if there's one near you. But also, disclaimer, Maximum Edge, unfortunately, is not a sponsor. So this is literally just my opinion. I haven't even ever gotten a free sharpening out of them after all the years. Maybe I should talk to them about that. But not a sponsor for this video. This is literally just my opinion, trying to give you guys the best information. So thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate every video that folks watch. I really enjoy doing these videos, and I've had a good time bringing you this information, and we're still not done. So next up, we will be talking about the basic rules of hockey. We're going to go over icing, we're going to go over offsides, we're going to go over how to set up for a face-off, the places on the ice that you should not enter at certain points in time and when those times are. It's going to be a good video for anyone who just wants to get the absolute basics.